I remember the sound of the front door closing more than anything else. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was just final. The kind of sound that tells you your life has split into two parts, before and after. That night, the house felt different. Too quiet. Too empty. I stood in the kitchen for a long time, staring at the chair where he had been sitting. The coffee in his mug had gone cold, but I couldn't bring myself to pour it out. It felt like if I cleaned it up, it would mean this was real. Upstairs, Noah pretended to be strong. He kept saying he didn't care. He said he was almost a man anyway. But I saw the way his jaw tightened and how he avoided looking at the driveway. Lily asked me if Daddy was coming back in the morning. I didn't know how to answer her without breaking her heart, so I just held her and said we would be okay. The next few days were a blur. Daniel didn't call. He didn't check on the kids. There was no message asking if we were managing. It was like he had erased us from his life overnight. I kept checking my phone anyway. Every vibration made my heart jump. But it was never him. I had to sit down and look at the bills by myself. Mortgage. Utilities. School expenses. Groceries. Numbers don't care about your feelings. They just sit there, waiting to be paid. For the first time in years, I felt scared about money. Not for me, but for the kids. I kept thinking, how do you explain to your children that their father chose something else over them? Friends started asking questions. I told them we were working through things. I wasn't ready to say the truth out loud. Saying it would make it permanent. And I wasn't sure I was strong enough for that yet. At night, when the kids were asleep, the anger would come. Not loud anger. Quiet anger. The kind that sits in your chest and makes it hard to breathe. I replayed every memory, every sacrifice, every time I believed we were building something together. I wondered when he started planning his exit. I wondered if he ever felt guilty. But mixed with the anger was something else, clarity. I realized I couldn't wait for him to fix what he broke. I couldn't sit around hoping he would suddenly remember we existed. I had 2 children watching me. The way I handled this would shape how they understood love, loyalty, and self-respect. So I made a decision that night. If he thought walking away would break us, he was wrong. I didn't know how I was going to do it yet. I didn't have a plan. All I had was determination and 2 kids who needed me to be strong. And sometimes, that's enough to start. When Daniel talks about his success now, he makes it sound like he built it alone. Like he woke up one day and became a respected corporate attorney by himself. But I remember the years no one else saw. Law school wasn't glamorous. It was exhausting and expensive. While he studied late into the night, I worked double shifts at the hospital. I would come home tired, my feet aching, and still pack his lunch for the next day. I handled Noah's school meetings and Lily's doctor appointments. I helped with homework, cooked dinner, cleaned the house, and made sure the lights stayed on. There were months when his internship barely paid anything. I covered the rent, the groceries, the gas. I told him not to worry about money, that his only job was to focus on graduating. I believed in him completely. When he felt like quitting, I reminded him why he started. We didn't take vacations like other families. I said we would travel later, after he finished school and got a good job. I wore the same winter coat for 5 years because buying him a sharp suit for interviews felt more important. When he got his first big offer, I cried with pride. I thought we had finally made it. But success changed him. At first, it was small things. He started correcting how I spoke at dinner. He would comment on my clothes, asking if I was going to dress better now that he worked with important clients. He complained about the house, saying it wasn't good enough for someone in his position. Even the kids became targets. If Noah talked back, Daniel blamed my parenting. If Lily made a mess, he would sigh like it was proof that our home was beneath him. The warmth between us slowly faded. Conversations became short and formal. He stopped asking about my shifts at the hospital. He stopped noticing when I was tired. Then Victoria entered the picture. I met her once at a company event. She was confident, well-spoken, and carried herself like she had never struggled a day in her life. She didn't look at me with kindness. She looked at me like I didn't belong there. After that, Daniel started staying late at work more often. Dinners grew cold on the stove while I waited. When I called to ask when he'd be home, he sounded annoyed. Sometimes he didn't answer at all. The small gestures disappeared first, the goodnight kisses, the random hugs in the kitchen, the way he used to reach for my hand while watching TV. Then the bigger things followed. He stopped sharing his thoughts. He stopped sharing his life. I kept telling myself it was stress. That his job was demanding. That this was just a phase. But deep down, I felt it. He wasn't just working late. He was already leaving. The divorce papers arrived faster than I expected. It felt like everything had already been planned. Every detail was organized, every document prepared. Daniel didn't hesitate. He didn't try counseling. He didn't ask for time. It was clear he had been ready long before I was. I sat at the dining table holding the envelope for a long time before opening it. My hands were shaking, but not because I was surprised. It was because I realized how replaceable I had become in his life. He had hired one of the best law firms in the city. I couldn't afford anything close to that. I found a local attorney who was kind but honest. He told me a long legal fight would cost more than I could manage. Daniel's team moved quickly, pushing everything forward without giving me space to breathe. During negotiations, Daniel claimed he was going through financial restructuring. He said his income wasn't stable. On paper, it looked complicated and technical. I didn't fully understand all the terms, but I understood one thing: he was trying to pay as little as possible for his own children. There were investments and bonuses mentioned in passing, things I had never heard about before. When I asked questions, his lawyer answered smoothly, like everything was normal and transparent. I felt small sitting there, surrounded by paperwork I hadn't seen before. Court day was cold and gray. Daniel looked polished and confident. He shook hands, nodded politely, and spoke clearly when the judge asked him questions. He looked like the reasonable one. Calm. Controlled. Successful. I, on the other hand, felt drained. I hadn't been sleeping. My thoughts were scattered. When I spoke, my voice trembled. I hated that. I hated looking weak in front of him. The judge reviewed the terms and signed the papers. Just like that, 17 years were reduced to a few signatures and stamped documents. It didn't feel real. There was no dramatic ending. Just silence and paperwork. Daniel didn't look at me when we left the courtroom. He gathered his things, spoke briefly to his lawyer, and walked out. I saw a slight smile on his face. Not a big one. Just enough to show relief. Maybe even victory. I sat in my car afterward and stared at the steering wheel. I wanted to cry, but nothing came out. I felt empty instead. Driving home was the hardest part. The kids were waiting. They didn't know the final decision yet. They were hoping, even if they didn't say it out loud. When I walked through the door, Noah looked at my face and understood immediately. He didn't ask questions. He just looked away and went to his room. Lily came closer. She searched my eyes for something hopeful. I knelt down and held her hands. My voice was steady, even though my heart wasn't. "Daddy isn't coming back," I said softly. And in that moment, it wasn't just my marriage that ended. It was the family we used to be. Life became very quiet after the divorce, but the problems were loud. The bills didn't slow down just because my marriage ended. Every week there was another envelope in the mailbox. Mortgage reminders. Utility shut-off notices. School fees. I tried to stay calm in front of the kids, but I felt the pressure building every single day. I picked up extra shifts at the hospital. Some weeks I barely slept. I would come home late at night, take off my shoes by the door, and sit in the dark living room for a few minutes before going upstairs. I didn't want the kids to see how tired I was. Noah changed the most. He stopped talking about school. He stayed in his room with the door closed. When I tried to ask how he was feeling, he would shrug and say he was fine. But I could see the anger in him. He felt betrayed. And he didn't know where to put that anger. Lily handled it differently. She became clingy. She would sit close to me on the couch and hold my arm. At night, I could hear her crying softly in her room. She thought I didn't notice, but I did. Some nights I lay awake listening to her, wishing I could take away her pain. Then came the letter from the bank. We were behind on the mortgage. If I didn't catch up soon, they would start foreclosure proceedings. The word alone made my stomach drop. This house was the only stable thing the kids had left. Losing it felt like losing the last piece of normal. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, I sat at the dining table with a pile of old folders. I was looking for anything I could sell or cancel. Old warranties. Insurance papers. Tax returns. I needed to understand every dollar. That's when I found it. At the bottom of a worn folder was a set of documents with both my name and Daniel's printed clearly on the first page. It was related to a private case he had handled years ago. I remembered the late nights he spent working on it, saying it might turn into something big one day. The company name caught my attention, Harper & Row Logistics. I frowned. I had heard that name before recently. I was sure of it. After a few minutes, it clicked. I had seen it mentioned in a local business report at the hospital. It had grown into a major transportation company in the Midwest. My hand started to shake as I read further. The paperwork listed me as a silent co-investor. Not just a witness. Not just a spouse. An actual equity holder. I read the page again to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding it. My name was still there. There were no later documents removing me. No transfer forms. Nothing that showed I had signed away my share. For the first time in months, my fear paused. I didn't fully understand what it meant yet. I didn't know how much the company was worth. But I knew one thing clearly. There was something Daniel never told me. And it might change everything. I didn't rush to call Daniel. I didn't want to face him yet. There was too much anger in me, and anger clouds everything. I needed someone who could explain the situation clearly, someone I could trust completely. That's when I thought of Michael Torres, an old college friend. Michael had become a financial advisor over the years. I remembered him as calm, smart, and honest. I sent him a message explaining the situation and asked if he could take a look at the documents I found. Within a day, he agreed to meet. I laid everything out on the table for him, the folders, the contracts, the fine print. I could see him reading carefully, frowning slightly, and taking notes. After what felt like hours, he looked up at me. "Emily," he said slowly, "you legally own 30% of Harper & Row. You were a silent partner the whole time, and Daniel never disclosed it during the divorce. He should have." I blinked. 30%. I had no idea what that meant in dollars, but I knew it was significant. Michael explained that the company had grown enormously. The early investment was now worth millions. "And the problem?" I asked quietly. "The problem," Michael said, "is that legally, he hid this information from the court. That counts as fraud. He could face serious consequences if this is pursued." I felt a strange mixture of shock and relief. For years, I had been struggling to keep the house, pay bills, and care for the kids, thinking Daniel had left everything behind. And all this time, a part of the wealth he built was mine, mine by law, mine by right. But anger wasn't my main feeling. Not really. Michael noticed it and asked if I wanted revenge. I shook my head. "No," I said. "I don't want to ruin his life. I just want what's fair. I want justice. Michael nodded. That's smart. Revenge can get messy. Justice is clean. You have the law on your side. We spent the next few hours going through every document. Michael explained exactly what steps I could take to claim my shares and protect my children's future. He talked about filing motions, notifying the right legal authorities, and making sure Daniel couldn't hide anything else. The more I understood, the more my mind cleared. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't powerless. Daniel had assumed I would stay quiet, scared, and struggling. He had underestimated me completely. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of control returning. It wasn't about punishment. It was about balance. About proving that honesty and loyalty mattered, even if someone else had tried to destroy them. That night, as I went to bed, I didn't feel hopeless. I felt prepared. I didn't know how Daniel would react when the truth came out, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going to wait for luck to fix things. I was going to make sure justice was served. And that thought alone gave me strength I hadn't felt in years. Daniel thought he had covered all his tracks. He thought Victoria's family would never question him. But when they started considering him for a position in their company, her father decided to do a thorough background check. It started small. Routine financial reviews, credit checks, and company records. But soon, things began to appear that Daniel hadn't planned for. The hidden shares in Harper and Row surfaced. The paperwork showing Emily's stake couldn't be ignored. And the court records from the divorce raised questions about what had been disclosed, or rather, what had been hidden. Victoria didn't expect to feel betrayed by Daniel. She didn't care about the past with Emily. But she cared about honesty. And when she learned that he had lied to her family about his finances, about his assets, she felt deceived. That betrayal hurt him more than anything else. Daniel's calm, polished image began to crack. Meetings he thought would be easy suddenly became uncomfortable. Questions he thought he could dodge were now pointed and unavoidable. His confidence wavered. For the first time, he looked uncertain, nervous, even a little afraid. Meanwhile, I moved quietly. I didn't call him. I didn't tell Victoria. I filed a legal motion in court to formally claim my share of Harper and Row. I worked with my attorney and Michael to make sure everything was correct. Every signature, every date, every document was reviewed. I wanted this to be solid, undeniable. I wasn't seeking revenge. I wasn't planning a confrontation. I was simply reclaiming what was legally mine. But I knew karma has a way of working without needing much help. As the days passed, Daniel's world began to shift. Opportunities he thought were guaranteed became uncertain. People who had trusted him started to hesitate. The careful life he had built on lies was suddenly unstable. And through it all, I stayed calm. I focused on the kids, on the house, and on securing our future. The difference now was that I had proof, legal authority, and a plan. The power was quietly moving back into my hands. I remember thinking one evening, as I looked at Noah and Lily doing their homework at the kitchen table, that life has a way of balancing itself. You can't force it, but sometimes, when someone ignores the consequences of their actions, the universe finds a way to correct the path. Daniel had made his choices. He had left us, he had lied, and he had assumed no one would notice. But the truth was out. And once it reached the right people, once the law and honesty began their work, his carefully constructed world started to crumble. For the first time in a long time, I smiled quietly to myself. I didn't celebrate his problems. I simply watched as the consequences of his actions started to unfold. And I knew our future, my future, and the kids, was finally safe. The day the court agreed to reopen the divorce settlement, I felt a strange mix of calm and relief. It wasn't about seeing Daniel suffer. It was about finally setting things right. The papers were filed quietly, carefully, without drama, but the effect was immediate. Daniel's law firm got the news quickly. They placed him on administrative leave while they investigated the financial discrepancies. For someone who had always walked into a room with confidence, he now looked unsettled. Calls that used to be answered instantly went unanswered. Meetings that once felt routine were now tense and awkward. Victoria, too, began to pull away. She didn't call me, and I didn't call her. I knew she had her own shock to process. She had trusted him, admired him, and suddenly learned that much of what she believed about him was a lie. Her distance was subtle but unmistakable. Meanwhile, Daniel's carefully constructed life began to unravel. The man who had mocked my simple life, who had criticized every choice I made, was now facing potential disbarment. He had spent years building an image of success and sophistication, but it was all built on omissions, lies, and hidden assets. That image started cracking in front of everyone who had once respected him. I didn't make phone calls. I didn't shout or argue. I didn't even need to explain myself to anyone. The law, the evidence, and the truth were enough. They spoke louder than any words I could have said. I focused on my life. I made sure the kids' routine stayed normal. I kept my hospital shifts and managed the house as usual. Each day, I watched as Daniel's world quietly fell apart without me lifting a finger. Friends noticed the change in me. They asked if I felt satisfied or happy with how things were unfolding. I told them no, not really. I felt peaceful. It wasn't about revenge. It was about balance. About truth finally coming to light after so many years of lies and betrayal. Noah and Lily noticed too, in their own way. Noah's anger softened, replaced by a cautious sense of justice. Lily's tears became rare, replaced by smiles that reminded me of the life we could still build. They didn't care about Daniel's punishment, but they cared about seeing fairness restored. And in the quiet moments, I realized something important: Daniel's fall from luxury wasn't the end of my story. It was just a part of it. I didn't need to chase him, argue with him, or prove anything to anyone. Life had a way of handling people who chose greed over loyalty, and I could step aside and let it happen. For the first time in years, I could breathe. I could focus on what mattered: my children, our home, and the life we would rebuild together. Daniel's empire of lies was crumbling, and I was free to live honestly and peacefully. That truth, more than anything, felt like victory. One afternoon, there was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, especially not him. Daniel stood there, looking different, tense, unsteady, unsure. The confident man I had known for years was gone. In his place was someone who looked desperate. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice tight. "Please, Emily. Can we fix this?" I studied him silently. His suit was expensive, his hair neat, but none of that mattered. I could see past it. I could see the truth. He wasn't here because he missed me. He wasn't here because he wanted to rebuild a family. He was here because his life was unraveling, and he needed me to save him. "I made a mistake," he continued, trying to sound sincere. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Let's just talk, okay?" I didn't answer immediately. I kept looking at him, noticing the subtle tremor in his hands, the way he avoided meeting my eyes. All the lies, all the abandonment, all the years of betrayal flashed through my mind. I realized he thought I would still cry, beg, or plead like I used to. But I didn't. "I know why you're here, Daniel," I said calmly. "You're not here for me. You're here for protection. You don't want the fraud charges to go through." He froze. His confident mask cracked for a moment. He looked at me, hoping I would deny it. Hoping I would react emotionally. Hoping I would still be the scared, powerless person he left behind. I he started, but the words faltered. "I'm not the same person, Daniel," I said firmly. "I won't protect you out of fear or guilt. I'm doing what's right for me and the kids. That's all." He looked desperate now, shifting from one foot to the other. He lowered his voice. "Please, Emily. I'm asking, don't push this any further. I can lose everything. I can lose my license, my career. I just need a chance to fix it without going to court. I listened quietly. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't shout. I simply watched him realize that the power had shifted. The man who once mocked my life, the man who left us without a second thought, was now standing on my doorstep pleading. I finally spoke. Daniel, there are rules. There are consequences. I will handle this the way it needs to be handled. If you expect mercy, that isn't guaranteed. But I will be fair. He nodded, swallowing hard, finally understanding that I wasn't the same woman he had left behind. I wasn't weak anymore. I wasn't crying. I wasn't powerless. For the first time in years, the roles had reversed. And I felt a calm strength settle over me, stronger than anger or sadness. He needed me, but I no longer needed him. After weeks of waiting and careful planning, I finally made my decision. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't angry or emotional. I thought about the kids, about our future, and about what was fair. Daniel had to face the consequences of hiding the assets, but I also wanted to protect my family and move forward. I contacted my attorney and told him I was ready to settle, but on my terms. I wasn't going to give in to fear or let him pressure me. I wanted full control over what was rightfully mine. The terms were clear. I would receive the full equity payout from Harper and Row. Back child support would be paid immediately, and college funds for Noah and Lily would be fully secured. The house, our home, would be completely in my name. No compromises. No delays. In exchange, I agreed not to pursue criminal charges. I wanted the law to protect what was ours, not destroy anyone. I didn't want revenge. I wanted security and fairness, nothing more. When Daniel received the documents, he hesitated. I could see the panic in his eyes. The confident, smooth-talking man who had once left us without a second thought now realized how serious I was. He tried to argue at first, but my attorney and the clear evidence left no room for negotiation. Finally, he signed. The papers were final. Everything was legally and officially in place. He no longer had power over our lives. A few weeks later, word came that Victoria had ended the engagement. She had discovered more about Daniel's lies and realized he wasn't the man she thought he was. The relationship crumbled, and for Daniel, it was another reminder of the consequences of his choices. Daniel had lost everything he thought he had gained. The wealth he had chased without thinking about anyone else, the family he abandoned, even the respect of those around him. His image was gone, replaced with uncertainty and regret. For me, it wasn't about celebrating his losses. I didn't feel satisfaction in watching him fall. My focus was on the future, mine and the kids. I had fought for what was ours, and now it was secure. Noah and Lily could go to school without worry. They could grow up in a home that belonged fully to us, a home where we didn't have to hide anything or fear losing it. I could breathe again, plan again, and live again. For the first time in years, I felt complete peace. The house was ours. The money was ours. The future was ours. Daniel's mistakes had taught a hard lesson, but the outcome gave us freedom, stability, and control over our lives. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to argue. I simply made the right choice, stayed strong, and let life handle the rest. And in doing so, I finally reclaimed everything he tried to take from us. 2 years had passed since everything fell apart, and life finally felt steady again. The house, once filled with tension and worry, now felt peaceful. The walls held laughter instead of silence. I could walk through it without feeling the weight of fear or uncertainty pressing down. Noah had grown in ways I hadn't imagined. His anger and hurt had softened into focus and determination. He earned a scholarship for his school, something that made both of us proud. I watched him study late at night, carefully planning his future. He had learned resilience, and I knew he would carry it with him for the rest of his life. Lily, on the other hand, found her joy in movement. Dance competitions became her escape and her passion. I cheered for her at every recital, every small victory, feeling happiness that wasn't tinged with worry. Seeing her smile, seeing her confidence grow, reminded me why all the struggles had been worth it. As for me, I didn't remarry. I didn't feel the need to. Life had taught me that true happiness doesn't come from depending on someone else. It comes from knowing your worth, standing strong, and building a life that can't be shaken by someone else's choices. I focused on my career, my health, and my children. Sometimes, I thought about Daniel. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel hurt. I remembered how he once chased wealth thinking it would make him powerful, untouchable, admired. And I realized he had missed the point. Because the real wealth wasn't money. It wasn't a fancy car or a big house. It was loyalty, integrity, and family, the things he had abandoned so easily. Those were the things that gave life meaning, the things that could not be bought or faked. And those were the things I had, and that he had lost. I never needed to gloat or prove myself to him. Karma didn't have to shout to make its point. It worked quietly, steadily, balancing the scales without anyone forcing it. Daniel had thought he had escaped the consequences of his choices, but life has a way of correcting itself. The loss he felt was a reflection of the loss he had caused. And me? I finally understood what mattered. I had a home full of love and stability, children who were strong and happy, and the confidence to face anything life could throw at me. I had freedom. I had respect. I had peace. In the end, that was the true victory. Not revenge, not money, not recognition, just the simple, unshakable knowledge that I had survived, I had protected my family, and I had built a life worth living. And that, more than anything else, was real wealth.